Yes, it's all we have. That's it. And all our communication, not only is it all we have, we cannot not communicate. That's the other challenge, because all our behavior has communication value.
Yeah, I can't believe we've done 6 episodes of our podcast. So, yeah, very, very excited to continue with this journey and to look at some more aspects of what makes therapy work.
Yes, yeah, me too. It's amazing to think that we're already 6 episodes in. Uh, we've covered quite a lot, yet at the same time, it's just on the surface.
Just scrape the surface of it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to have a look at what we covered. So in this last episode, so where we started off is just really looking at what makes therapy work and starting to have a look at the nature and quality of a therapeutic relationship and what aspects is important. So just very briefly looking at congruence and empathy and unconditional positive regards. And then from there that we started to have a look at the asocial role of a therapeutic relationship and how come that is important and where does it fit in as well. And then with that as well, then go that we went to the directive and the non-directive approach, starting to have a look at what is each of these directives, and then also when to do a directive, when to be non-directive as well, and what is the value of both of these approaches. And then even gone further and started to have a look at, so what is how to be person-centered? How does a therapist be person-centered in a therapeutic relationship?
Yeah, that's so clear. Maybe we haven't only just scratched the surface.
Maybe a bit more than just that.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So for today, I've really we started to have a look at that and then to add a different element. And that is to starting to have a look at communication and really go into a bit more depth about the communication model.
What you've noted here about communication is it has very much to do with nature and quality of the therapeutic relationship. Communication is key, but we often talk about communication. What is it? And that we need to communicate, even we need to communicate effectively, but what exactly do we mean? So the key here is actually understanding what communication is. And we have really a profound model or approach that we have to make sense of communication is the
Communication
communication
model.
theory model. Indeed. Yeah.
Okay, so to really, to make sense of that and go into more depth of that, to really understand. And it's like you say, we all communicate on a daily basis, but when we understand the communication model, there's actually so much power in it.
Yes. Yeah, there is. Because it's actually very, very complex. So are you ready to explore this and look at it more closely?
That will be lovely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So when we look at the communication model, what we're actually looking at is some very profound work done by Ruesch and Bateson, and we'll come back to them at a later stage. But these figures in psychotherapy and therapy did some remarkable work around understanding and investigating communication. And they developed part of this, the communication theory model. So the way it works is we, for communication, have at any point in time, for communication to occur, we've got to have a sender and then we've got to have a receiver. And they're just roles that we assume, one person in the role of sender, the other one in that role of receiver, just momentarily. And what needs to happen for a single cycle of communication to occur is the sender needs to transmit a message to the receiver. And because the sender cannot and cannot expect the receiver to mind read, the only thing that we have is our behavior. So we have, as we've touched on before, we've got verbal and non-verbal communication. You could think of it as that your verbal is 20%. It's not exactly that, but just by way of understanding the relative emphasis or importance. So about 20% for your verbal communication and 80% your non-verbal, the how that you qualify the communication. in what context, the timing, tone, all of these aspects of nonverbal will actually qualify the message. So the sender has to first encode a message in their head, and they just have to think of it. They've not said anything, they've not behaved it, as it were. It's just the thought, the idea that's encoded, their intention or what they want to communicate in some kind of behavior, of verbal and nonverbal behavior. Once they've encoded that, and there can be issues with encoding, that how they intend to express it and the behavior they've used or want to use is off in some way. But if it is spot on and it's accurate, lined, then the next step is they now need to transmit that communication. And when they transmit that communication with their behavior, verbal and nonverbal can go off track. So perhaps we could just look at how that can happen. If you had any experience there or any ideas about it.
I think it's the communication understanding that it's all about, it's actually start with the person and the encoding, and then, like you said, with the transmission and how your verbal and non-verbal communication, actually they have to complement each other. And sometimes we don't, we're not, we it doesn't always complement, and it can create a lot of confusion if a person says something but their non-verbals say something different. Or like you mentioned with the timing as well, that the timing is just not in place with the verbal communication. Or the consistency, saying I'll do one thing, but then time and time again it's different behavior. So there's so many parts of that with the non-verbal and verbal communication that's important.
Yeah, it's quite amazing that we're able to communicate given the challenges that and the misalignment that can occur between our verbal and nonverbal, and the aspects of tone, timing, context. It's just, these are such nuances. So communication is just this exquisite tool, the way that we relate, but it also means that we have such challenges on account of this misalignment or lack of fit between verbal and nonverbal. So, yes, when it comes to transmitting the message, I'm now transmitting that message in terms of verbal and nonverbal, and how I encoded it, but how I transmit it has gone off. Then, if it is transmitted accurately, that how I plan to express it and the way in which I express it, I do so in terms of meaningfully, in terms of the intention. The receiver now has to receive that communication, and they can only receive that in terms of the five senses. So they would have to hear it, if they would have to see it, if the message of communication was visual, if it involves touch, registering touch. So in effect, they have to accurately receive the message in terms of their senses. If they do receive it accurately, they still have to decode it. What does it mean? And they can decode it inaccurately or misunderstand it. So if they do decode it accurately, now because they need to give feedback in some way, there's no mind reading. The only way they can get the feedback is through behavior. So they have to encode a feedback message. Then if they do that accurately, they then have to transmit that feedback. If that is transmitted accurately, and it can go off track there as well, the receiver or the sender, who is now having to receive that message in all its senses and accurately receive it and still decode it. And that's just one cycle of communication.
That's just one, and there's with 8 steps in that one cycle.
Yes, it's quite incredible. 8 steps. It can go off track anywhere. And we have just thousands of these rounds, these cycles that occur very, very quickly, rapidly. So it's remarkable that we can communicate meaningfully
At
at all.
all.
Yes.
This talking about it, this takes me just back to M1 and looking at it and exploring it. And if I remember, we spent days, if not weeks, on this one topic. So it's so profound, and having been able to explore it with both with you and with Prof. Shaw Foster in our M1, it's actually so complex, and there's so much detail to this.
Yes. We could actually really look at this in more depth and perhaps at a later stage, especially when we start looking at couple therapy, because there's so much to learn, so much to explore, because it's just remarkably meaningful. Because once you understand communication and where it can go off track, one can appreciate the nuances for couples, for therapists. It's just it's a key skill, and it's a key part of how we relate.
How we relate. Communication is really all we have, actually.
Yes, it's all we have. That's it. And all our communication, not only is it all we have, we cannot not communicate. That's the other challenge, because all our behavior has communication value. So it's all we can have and all we have, and we cannot not have it.
Yo, it's so complex. And looking at the communication model, and looking at those 8 different steps and how it can go off in any one of those steps. And just understanding it in more detail and being able to identify when and how it goes off, that can be so much empowerment in showing clients this and how to utilize it and work with it. So I think it can be so meaningful.
I share that clients so often just have an aha moment when they realize that what they've intended and how they've communicated, the impact to effect, that intention effect are not necessarily the same. And understanding it and making sense where it's gone off. Wow.
Yo. So I think you're just looking forward to our next episode as well, is that we're going to start to have a look at how do you enter someone else's frame of reference? How do you do it? How do you, how do you manage that? So looking very forward to that and just going into depth about the communication model even more and more.
I share that. Yeah, I can't wait. I think it's just so important. So let's pause.